Alright, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Ches, Daf 58 of Masechta Kiddushin. Friends. Yo, friends. We're gonna wrap up the current Mishnah. Talking like things that are also bana. We're gonna start another Mishnah. Talks about other things that are not exactly other stuff like Truma and Meiser. All right. And then we're finishing the second parak of Masechta Kiddushin and starting the third. Friends, as I've been pointing out recently, we are marching ahead towards the end of Masechta Kiddushin. All right. Okay. Okay, where are we? Okay, Be'etzim we're halfway through Nun Ches Amud Aleph at the two dots where it says Machron v'Kiddush b'Dmein Mekudeshes. Got it? Good. Let's go weiter. So we said by all these things in the Mishnah, Kilei Akarim, things like that, right, that are also ba'anoya. So if you're Mekadesh with them, a fellow's Mekadesh a fellow with them, ain't a Mekudeshes. However, if you sell them, so what happens is if you take Kilei Akarim for example and you sell it to somebody else, the Kilei Akarim is still going to be Kilei Akarim, just it's not yours anymore, it's the new person's, and it's still Kilei Akarim, and the money that you received for it is just regular old money, right? Meaning, so, for example, Hektish, right? If you have like your lawnmower, and you Maktish your lawnmower, and then you could transfer the value onto money. Now the money is Kadosh, and the lawnmower is no longer Kadosh. However, when it comes to these items, if you sell them to somebody else, they remain Asur Ba'ana, and the money that you receive for them is mutter. So I feel like we discussed in the past, like money laundering, and is this like you're kind of washing the like Asur Ba'ana stuff, and now you have money and it's mutter Ba'ana, maybe. All right. So fine. Michon v'Kiddush b'Dmein Mekudeshes. Minolan. How do we? So Machon v'Kiddush b'Dmein Mekudeshes. Minolan. How do we know this? Midigaler Rachmana b'Avodas Kechavim. Or who could tell me what Avodas Kechavim is? Getchkes. From the fact that the Torah says by the Getchkes ve'Yisacherim Kamo, that if you sell them and you receive money for them, the money will be Osir. So Kol Shata Mahaye Meno Hare hu kamo, anything that sort of comes from it will be like it. So if you sell it and you get money, so the money will be asur ba'ana. Michlal d'chol isurim shebatorah sharu, implying that so by the getchkes that's what happens, that the money would become asur ba'ana. But by other things like kilei akarim, the money would be mutar ba'ana. You can be mekadesh a fellow with the money. V'neilaf mino, and why don't we learn from the getchkes and say that if by the getchkes the money is asur, so by everything the money is asur. So because, as we've learned about a million times in Masechta Kiddushin, the concept of shnei ksuvim ha'boin ke'echad, because getchkes and shmita are shnei ksuvim ha'boin ke'echad, are two examples of something that the Isser Hanoya is transferred onto the not this one, but the Isser, the status, is transferred onto money. And whenever we have Shnei Ksuvim Ha'boin Ke'echad, you can't learn from there, right? So it's limited to those two cases. It's limited to the Getchkes and to Shemitah. We can't apply it globally. So we just discussed Avodas Kechavim, that the money it takes on the Isser Hano Shvius Mahi. What is the case by Shemitah? Yovel hi Kodesh Ti'elachim. Well, it says by Yovel, but I think the point is that the 50th year also has a status of Shemitah. It's also Shemitah year, right? So when there's Yovel, so Be'etzim year 49 and year 50 are Shemitah. Kodesh Ti'elachem, it will be Kodesh. So my Kodesh Tofes is Dom, Avav Shvius Tofes is Domel. So just like if you have the lawnmower and you makdish the lawnmower, then you transfer the value onto money. So then the kedusha of the lawnmower goes onto the money. So also by shvius, the kedusha shvius is transferred to the money. Ima kodesh tofes is dama v'yotze l'chulin, av shvius tofes is dama v'yotze l'chulin. B'fekti gemar. Then why don't we say that? Well, then, just like by the lawnmower, when you transfer the kedusha of the lawnmower onto the money, now the money is kadosh, the lawnmower is no longer kadosh. So shall we say the same thing by shmita? That if you sell shmita and you receive money, the money is kadosh kedusha shvius, but not the shmita anymore? Talmud lomar tiyeh bavayoso tehei. So it says no. It says, what does it say? It says Yovali Kodesh Tiyeh Lochem. So it says Tiyeh that where am I? Tiyeh Bavayosu Tehei, that it remains Kadosh. Okay, sorry, I distracted myself. So I distracted myself. Okay, so yeah, right. So if you take Shemitah stuff and you sell it, so the Shemitah stuff remains Shemitah stuff, but also the money is also Kadosh Kedusha Shvius now. Ketzad. So for example, Lokach bepeir shvius baser. If you have shmita fruits and you swap it for meat, okay, so you give somebody the peir shvius and now you get meat. Elu va'elu mizbarim b'shvius. So that's in both the meat and the peir shvius. Now both have kedusha shvius, right? Then you have to, you can't hoard it for yourself once there's no longer any available. You have to be mafkir it. Bibasar dogim. Now, if you take the basar, the meat that has kedusha shvius, and you transfer it for fish, so now yotza basar nichnas dogim. So now the basar at this point is no longer kadosh kedusha shvius, but the fish that you transferred for it is bidogim yain. If then with the fish you then get wine, you swap it for wine. Yotzu dogim nichnas yain. So now the wine has kedusha shvius, but not the fish. B'yain shemen. If then you swap the wine for oil, yotza yain nichnas shemen. The wine is no longer kadosh kedusha shvius, but the oil is. Haketzad achrin nitpas bashvius ufer atzmo aser. So be'etzem each latter swappage, the latest swapping thing. So the latest swap. Let's just stop there. Let's call it a swap. The latest swap is going to be the thing that has the kedusha shvius plus the original fruit, right? So you had transferred swapped the original fruit for initially meat. So now both of them are kedusha shvius. And now the original fruits will always remain kedusha shvius, but the meat, if you swap it for fish, well then the meat is no longer kedusha shvius. The fish is. If you swap the fish for wine and the wine for oil, it's always going to be the latest swap. No, it's already a template that we have seen a few times already. The whole concept of shnei ksuvim ba'in ke'echad ein melamdin is a machlokas. So we wanted to say that how do I know that kilei akerim, when I sell it, the money is not osur bano? Well, because only by avodah zarah and by shmita would the status be transferred onto the money, but you can't apply it to other places. But what about according to opinion that says that you can? So maybe shouldn't we say that by all these other examples the money would be osur bano? So mi'ute ksive, no, because there are limiting words, right? Ksivacha ki cherem hu. It says by getchkes ki cherem hu, that it is cherem. Uksivasam yovel he, that it is yovel. He in midiachrina lo. It is yovel, but not, right? It basically has kedusha shvius, but not other things. So only by getchkes and kedusha shvius would the money take on their status, but not by these the examples in our Mishnah that are osur ba'ano. Okay. Chevish, we go weiter. Good. Says the Mishnah, Hamakadish betrumis uvemaisris uvmatonis. A fellow is makadish a fellow with truma, with meiser, with, right? What's matonis? Who can tell me what matonis is? Rashi can tell us what it is. Hazor v'lechayim v'akeva. The arm, the jaws, and the stomach. Who can tell me what that is? It's talking about when you have an animal, so you take the zor l'chayim and keva and you give it to a coin. You give it to a coin. So if you mekadesh a woman, that's got to be interesting. Wow, that would be interesting. Mekadesh a woman with like a shopping bag with a cow, jaw, arm, and stomach. Let's see how that goes. All right. So, Uvmechatas, Uvefer chatas, right? With paraduma water, with paraduma ashes. Harizah Mikudeshes, she is Mikudeshes Vafilu Yisrael, and even if the person being Mekadesh is just a regular Jew, not a Kohen, is Azar, these things work. I won't say why right now. Let's go weiter. Amr Ula says Ula Tova Sanoya Eina Momin. Okay, so basically there's two ways that we can understand our Mishnah that we're about to see in a second. The first concept is the concept of Tova Sanoya, right? So if I have a field and I have all my produce and I separate Truma, well, I could choose which Kohen I want to give it to. And that, right, Tova Sanoya, that benefit that I have, that I can choose, has a value. And I don't know, I guess theoretically, if somebody wanted let's say you have a guy, you to give the truma to his, grandson. Maybe he's not a Kohen, but maybe his daughter married a Kohen and his grandson's a Kohen, whatever it is. I feel like we've seen this maybe somewhere. Maybe he wants you to give your truma to his grandson, whatever. So he's basically, in exchange for you giving up your choice and having him say, give it to my grandson, maybe you could charge him for that as a price. But how much are you willing to depart with that right that you have, with that benefit that you have to choose who you give your truma to? That has a value. And therefore, we could say that this Yisrael, this guy who gives truma, right? So he separates truma and then he gives it to his, he gives it to this fella, and he says, now you can choose who to give it to. So that value of choice, the Tova Sanoya, the benefit that, he's basically saying, hey, you can choose who to give, which Kohen to give it to. So that has value and is being Mekadesh with that value. So now it says Ula Tova Sanoya Eina Mamun. So now comes Ula, it's controversially, and he says Tova Sanoya Eina Mamun. That sort of a value that we place on sort of a privilege is not considered Mamun, and therefore you shouldn't be able to be Mekadesh a woman with it. But Eisve, Rabbi Abba asked Ula, I don't understand. I'm a Kadesh b'trumis uv maisus uv matonis mechadus ve'v'pori arezo mekudeshes. But we say that you can be Mekadesh a fellow with Truma. What is that? Isn't that Tova Sanoya Vafilu Yisrael, even just a Zar, even a regular Jew? So Amarle, so Ula responds, no. In the Mishnah he's not being Mekadesh with Tova Sanoya. Hacha b'Yisrael shenaflu lo tvalim mibeis avi imo koin v'kasover matonish shelo hormu k'mish hormu damin. Chavit, do you hear what the Gemara says? You probably heard it, you probably didn't understand it. That's where I come in. So you have a guy, his mother is a bas kohen, his grandfather is a kohen. Now his grandfather had a field, he harvested the field. Now he has to separate truma, but because he's a kohen, he basically separates the truma and then he keeps it. It's his. So it's his. It's his property. He owns it. And then, so basically you have this grandfather. The grandfather had a field. He harvested the field. He hasn't yet separated truma, and then he dies. So we're saying that even though he hadn't yet separated truma, it's as though he had separated truma, and now the truma belonged to him, the grandfather, who was a kohen. He then died, and now his grandson is his daughter, and I guess through his daughter, the grandson is inheriting his grandfather, and he inherited this truma which belonged to his grandfather, and now its actual mamun is being mekadesh this fellow with the truma, which is just part of his grandfather's estate that he inherited. Okay. So again, we're talking about this fellow's being mekadesh a fellow with basically his grandfather was a kohen and he died, and he had all this tevel, he had this untied stuff, and it belonged to his grandfather who was a kohen, because of matana shelo or mukimish or mudamin, that the Truma that had not yet been separated, because it was still tevel, it's as though it was already separated, and therefore the grandfather was in his possession of his own truma, because he's a kohen, he can eat his own truma, and now the grandson inherits it, and it's basically inheritance, it's mammon, it's money, and he's mekadesh a fella with that. Ba o mine, Reb Chia bar Avin, Reb Huna, Reb Chia bar Avin asked Reb Huna, Tovas hana mammon, o ena mammon. Reb Chia bar Avin asked Reb Huna, is Tovas hana mammon or not? Amarle? So Reb Huna says, well, from our Mishnah, Tinisua, Mekadesh, Betrumasu, Maisus, Matonus, B'mechadus ve'fer para, Rezu Mekudeshes. Vafilu Yisrael. So we see from our Mishnah that he's being fellows being Mekadesh a fella with Truma. So Reb Huna wants to assume that he's being Mekadesh with the Tovas hana. So it sounds like Tovas hana is mammon. Amarle. So, but Reb Chia bar Avin responds, V'lavu kimna b'Yisrael shnaf lo tvalim mibeis avi imo kohen. So Rav Chia bar Avin asked Rav Huna, but didn't we say that the Mishnah is not talking about Tovas hana? The Mishnah is talking about where this grandson inherited from his father, etc. So Amle Hutzah at. So Rav Huna says you're a Hutzah. Ichsif Husaver Mishmaita Kamale. So Rav Chia bar Avin got embarrassed. He thought that what Rav Huna was saying to him was Hutzah at. You're removed from the learning. You don't know what you're talking about. You're so far removed from knowing anything about the topic. So Amalei, so Rav Huna realized that Rav Chia bar Avin was taken aback. He says, no, Amalei Achi Kameni, no, Chas v'Shalom. I'm not saying that you're an ignoramus. Rav Asi de Hutzol Koi Kavasach. That Rav Asi from Hutzol, it's like, the same kind of word, is like holds like what you're saying, that it's about the grandson who inherited his grandfather. Let's say that this shaila of is Tovas hana mammon or not, let's say it's like a machlokes tanoim agoniv tivlo shel chavero. Shimon steals Ruvain's tevel. Shimon steals Ruvain's tevel. Agoniv tivlo shel chavero. Shimon steals Ruvain's tevel. Mishalim lo dmei tivlo shel chavero divrei Rebbe. So Rebbe says Shimon needs to pay back Ruvain for what he stole. Reb Yosef Reb Yehuda Omer einu mishalim ela dmei chulin shebo. So Yosef Reb Yehuda says he only needs to pay back the chulin, but the Truma and Meiser part doesn't have to pay him back, because after all, Ruvain had to give those to a Kohen and a Levi, so they weren't his anyways, and the Tovas Hanoah, so we want to argue that, and the fact that, but he had the choice of who he wanted to give it to, that's not Mammon, therefore Shimon doesn't have to pay him back. That's how we understand it, right? So, my lab, to my server Tovas Hanoah Mammon, my server Tovas Hanoah Eno Mammon. So we want to say that Rebbe says that Shimon has to pay back Reuven 100%. He has to pay back, obviously, the Chulin, but even the Trumas and Maisris, it was, he stole from Reuven the option to choose who he wants to give those things to, and and Rebbe holds Tovas hana mammon, and therefore Shimon has to pay back Reuven 100%, whereas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda holds that Tovas hana eina mammon, and Reuven would have had to give away the Trumas and Maisros anyways. So what? So he lost the option to choose who it's being given to? That's not mammon, and therefore Shimon doesn't have to pay him back for that. Lo duchuli alma Tovas hana eina mammon. No, both Rebbe and Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda agree Tovas hana eina mammon. V'acha betvalim shenafilu mibeis avi imo koyin. So here it's talking about where Reuven had inherited the tevel from his grandfather who was a koyin. Uvmatana shalahurmu k'mishahurmu damyon k'miflage. In the machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda is about, do we treat it as though the trumas were already separated, right? If we treat it like they were already separated, so then that was mammon, and he would have to pay it back. That's how Rebbe holds. But if we treat it as though they weren't separated yet, so therefore he basically just inherited tevel from his grandfather, and he would have to separate Trumas and Maisris, and we're saying Tovas hana eina mammon, so Rabbi Yehuda says that Shimon does not have to pay back Reuven for the Trumas and Maisris. So right, so Marsover Kimi Shehurmu Damyon. Rebbe treats it that that it was as though they were already separated by his grandfather, and his grandfather's a kohen, so they belonged to him, and Reuven inherited all of that stuff from his grandfather, and it's therefore his mammon, and Rebbe therefore says that Shimon has to pay back Reuven 100%, whereas Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says we do not treat it as though the grandfather had already separated the Trumas and Maasros, and we don't treat it as though it was the mammon of the grandfather. It was all Tevel, and Reuven inherited Tevel, therefore he needs to separate Trumas and Maasros. Tovas Hanoah ain't a mammon. Shimon doesn't have to pay back Reuven for the Trumas and Maasros. Alternatively, Duchuli Alma Kimi Shahurmu Damyom. Alternatively, you could say that it's not talking about the grandfather. No, we're not talking about anybody's grandfather. Shimon Pashit stole Tevel from Reuven. Now, Duchuli Alma Kimi Shahurmu Damyon, that everyone agrees that it would have been as though the Trumas were already separated. V'tovasana eina mamon, and Tovasana is not mamon. V'hacha b'dishmuel kamifligi. But the machlokes in Rebbe and Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is on the concept of Shmuel. The Shmuel says Shmuel chita achas poteres esakri, that even separating just one wheat kernel is enough to, right? Because after all, Truma doesn't actually have an amount in the Torah. Technically, it could be any amount. So even one wheat kernel could be enough to say, all right, I separated Truma. And it's talking about where he did that, right? Reuven had separated one wheat kernel. Shimon then stole everything else. And Rebbe says, like Shmuel, that it's considered like Truma was already separated, and therefore Reuven says, give me all of it back. Although Rashi points out that this really only counts for Truma. It won't matter for Meiser. But anyways. And Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says, no, it's not considered like he separated Truma. And therefore, Reuven can't ask for all of it back because Shimon can withhold the Truma. So the Mar Islay de Shmuel, Rebbe holds like Shmuel, and therefore Shimon has to pay back everything to Reuven, I guess minus one wheat kernel. Humar Leislay de Shmuel. And Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda does not hold of Shmuel, and therefore, I guess Shimon can withhold a more significant amount for Truma. All right. No, nobody holds of Shmuel, right? And that one wheat kernel will not be enough to be considered Truma. The Rebbe, this is why Rebbe says that Shimon has to pay back all of the stuff to Reuven, and he can't, withhold Truma. The Kansur Rabban Leganif, because the rabbis don't want to reward Shimon the Ganif, and therefore they say Shimon, pay it back entirely. Right? Whereas Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says no, they didn't punish him, and they said, and therefore says Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, he can withhold the Truma. You won't have to pay back Reuven for that. Okay. Fine. Everybody agrees of Shmuel, and therefore when Reuven had separated one wheat kernel, that was enough to consider like Trumas were separated. But this is why Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says that he does not need to pay back all of it. Because the rabbis are finding Reuven, he shouldn't have kept his tevel around for so much that, why was it stolen in the first place? Why didn't you immediately separate Trumas Maasros and give it away? So therefore, we're saying Reuven is getting fined, and he's not going to get back 100% of what was stolen. Tanam, we learned in our Mishnah, we said that a fellow can be mekadesh a fellow with Trumas, Maasros, Matonis, right, of the animal, b'mechatos, paraduma water, paraduma ashes, arizu mekudeshes. Ba'afilu Yisrael, even if it's a zar, a non-kohen. V'aminu, we have a kasha, notel, socher ladun, a fellow who receives reward, right, payment to be a judge, din of betelim. His verdicts are irrelevant. L'hayid, edusa betelim, if a fellow receives money to testify, his testimony is bottle. L'hazus l'kadesh, meimav meimayra ve'efer mikla. And if a fellow receives money in order to sprinkle the mechatos, or to prepare the mechatos, meimav I'm sorry, right, to sprinkle or to make the mechatos. Meimav meimayris. So the mechatos, they're going to be considered just like cave water. They're not going to be considered proper mechatos. Therefore, Efer Mikla and the ashes, they're just going to be considered like paper ashes. They're not considered like Efer Paraduma. You can't receive money to do these things. So we see that you can't get any benefit from these things. So Rabbi Lokasha kam b'schar hava'a umiloi. Look, he's being mekadesh with sort of, I guess, the value maybe that he received for bringing the ashes and filling up like the mechatos and stuff, meaning, I guess filling up the water to bring there, I guess, meaning he's not for the actual like burning of the paraduma or the actual mixing of the ashes in the water. No, that you can't receive money for. But for the Facebook meta kind of things, like bringing it to the site and things like that, you can receive money for that. But for the actual sprinkling of the mechatos, the actual preparation of the mechatos, that would be a problem. Dekonami, we can also infer from our Mishnah, Dekatani Yachab Mai B'mei Chatos V'Efer Para V'Katani Osam L'Hazus L'Kadosh. Right? It says in our Mishnah with the Mechatos and the Efer Para where they haven't yet actually been mixed together yet. V'Katani Osam where it says it's a problem, it's L'Hazos, it's to actually sprinkle it L'Kadosh and to make the Mei Para Shmamina, so that's a problem. So right, so actually doing these activities you cannot be paid for, but the Facebook meta things around them, that value is acceptable, and you can be mekadesh a woman with that. I guess with like the money that you received for doing these things, I guess, or for I don't exactly know what you're being mekadesh with. I guess maybe like the money you received for doing these things. I guess. Yeah, I think that's the point, right? That he received money for like transporting these things or whatever, and he was Mekadesh with that. Hajan Olach Ish Mekadesh. Okay, we'll come back to Ish Mekadesh. All right, so we finish up the previous Mishnah with saying that if you like sell these things that are also Banor, you can be Mekadesh with that money. And then we started another Mishnah about Trumas and Maisvis, and we got into the Kasha of Tovasana and Mammon or not, some other things. Alright, and then we finished the second parak of Masechta Kiddushin, moving on to the third out of 4 prakim of Masechta Kiddushin. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.